Michelle, do you think we can start?
Yeah,
Okay, then let us start. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us with the webinar. This webinar is for the launch of the report, special report, Common Security in the Indo-Pacific Region. And I believe this is the first report on the topic of common security in this part of the world. So welcome to this very special webinar. I'm your moderator for today. And my name is Francis Dae-hoon Lee, working with Peace Momo based in Seoul, South Korea. I'd like to run this webinar in this way. We have 4 speakers to introduce the reporter, and each speaker may have up to 10 minutes of introducing each part of the report. Then we'll have general Q&A sessions. Questions are welcome about the report and contents, and also we welcome comments, suggestions, etc. So this is very, how to say, non-formal, open webinar to share the contents and the process and the meanings of this report. And to just briefly outline how this report came about before I introduce 4 speakers of today. This is a very short report, 54 pages, but it contains 13 articles. And the speakers, I think it took almost more than 2 years to come up with this with the joint outcome. It's a resource book, and we produced this report as a resource to think in a new way, think for the alternatives to the security stalemates that we are experiencing today. And I'd like to appreciate IPB and Rainer Braun first, when in 2022, in December, when IPP proposed a common security working group to discuss the current situation, the current tensions, and possible ways of deliberating on the idea of common security. So many people were invited to this working group in IPB. And at the beginning, we tried to organize by inviting speakers, several webinars to discuss different regions, different conflicts, and different developments around the world. Then around in spring 2023, the key writers of the final report, we came up with the idea that let's put into writing the outcomes of this series of seminars we had since December 2022. And this is the outcome. And really many people have worked together. The number of writers are 9, but there are much more people who have contributed to the production of this report. So we will listen to the key points, key arguments, and key recommendations contained in this very special report. And I'd like to invite the first speaker, Rainer Braun, and let me introduce him, even though many of you already know him. He has been active in German and international peace movements since 1982, and he served as co-president and then executive director of International Peace Bureau since 2013 to 2022. He was also a founding member of international network No to War, No to NATO. Now, I welcome Rainer to give us what's the idea behind this report and how was your idea, your argument about tectonic shift that you included in this report. Rainer.
Yeah, thank you so much. And it is a great pleasure to work with you over years for finalizing this report. Let me start with 2 sentences which shows for me the political circumstances. First of all, we are living in a time of tectonic changes of the international power structure. The hegemony of the Western countries is over. The new world, the more multipolar world, is not really created. And in this situation, where one side is dead, the other side is not born. We are living in a very dangerous time. And that is my second point to underline, that we never had a dangerous time since 1945 than today. We are so near to a big international war since never, and the situation is dangerous, the escalation dynamic very, very big and great. And in this situation, IPB and many friends of IPB, partners, are starting developing a document that brings together common security and regional development. And you can now say, this is an illusion, how you can do this in such a situation. My personal view is, it is needed that we are formulating vital visions for security and the peace process in the Indo-Pacific region. And this we have done with this report. And the vision has a great tradition. When the Olaf Palme report in 1982 comes out, no one was believing that what was written in this report, a vision for a peaceful Europe, could become reality in the next years. But it becomes reality in the 80s, mainly by the politics of Mikhail Gorbachev. And the second Olaf Palme report, 40 years later, in April 2022, developed by IPB, ITOC, the National Trade Unions Confederation, and the Olaf Palme Center, together with many experts, also formulated a new vision for peace. And new was two key points. The first key point is that we are living in a global world and we need global security all over the world. But this global security can only be reached by regional structures of common security. So we need the global approach to common security, because only on this way we can solve the global problems. And we need the regionalization. This was the key new vision of the 2022 report. So this report brings back the old traditional ideas of Olaf Palme for disarmament and common security, and the new ideas in a global world with regional approaches. And had as a background, and I think we should never forget this, the report of April 2022 reflect to the UN, to the United Nations and the UN system. It reflects to the big international UN conferences on development, of environment, of climate, of sustainable development, and reflect that these reports, these conferences, need a new common security world peace structure, and underlined that without common security, there is no chance to fulfill the obligations which are the results of the conferences I mentioned. To say it in an easy word, there will be no sustainable world. There will be no world without hunger and poverty. There will be no solving of the climate challenges when we will not have peace and common security. This is the big process which is written down in the Common Security Report 2022, and which was developed further for our new report for the Indo-Pacific region. And the second key point is that it is impossible to develop common security strategy for the whole world. What is needed and what is developed is a common security philosophy for the whole world. Common security philosophy means point like cooperation, dialogue, negotiations, all kinds of cooperation, comprehensive disarmament. And as a background, the key ideas, which is always mentioned in the report, and I will now quote the report, the most important characteristic of a common security is the acceptance of the interdependence, a common and shared responsibility, and the insight that security in the long run is only possible with and not against the conflict partner, namely security in the comparative sense, including social justice, peace with nature. This means security and peace you can only have as a double pack when you have both sides in the boat. Otherwise, you have never a security system. This philosophy of common security has also a second key point, and this is the regionalization of common security. Regionalization means that strategies for common security must be developed in the different regions of the world. The first Olaf Palme report developed this strategy for Europe, for the Cold War in Europe, with steps of cooperation, trust building, economical, ecological context, people's diplomacy, till to disarmament processes. The second Olaf Palme report developed the task and even the obligation to develop regional reports after having the philosophy and global common security report of April 2022. And the first approach, the first development, the first result of this thinking is the new Indo-Pacific region. This makes the report very universally, very useful, very important, and I think it's really a big step forward to concretize the general philosophy and ideas of common security for the regional development and for regions in the world, mainly for the regions where we have the big dangers of hotspot war development. And I'm very happy to say personally at the end, I'm very happy that I could be a part of such a development with so serious and intelligent colleagues with whom I could develop these reports. It is a regional report of common security for one of the most important regions in the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Rainer, for your excellent intro of the report and various possibilities. Many of us who are coming from East Asia, and especially from the country like South Korea, the only concept of security we are familiar with is national security, which is a single state-based, it's confrontational, which does not include the regional dimensions in the imaginations, and it does not include mutual interdependency of the security arrangements. So thank you for your messages and key points for this report. Now I'd like to turn to the second speaker, Anuradha Chenoy. I think our team, the writing team, owes her sharp analysis and insightful perspective very much in the whole process of writing this report. Anuradha Chenoy is adjunct professor of Jindal Global University and associate fellow of the Transnational Institute. And for Anu, we call her Anu. For Anu, I'd like to ask, introducing the report, what are the key points, key contents, and your key analysis? And what do you take from this report? Anu?
Thank you very much. And it was indeed a privilege to be part of writing this report. And for me, it was such a learning process. And I hope that you all will also read the report, because it is really a new learning process, an important one. So I'm actually going to begin with our conclusions and my own conclusion of this report by saying that we clearly and logically need common security in the Asia Pacific. And why this conclusion? Because this militaristic competition that characterized the Cold Wars in the West and the hot wars in Southeast Asia in the 70s are now playing out with an increased fervor in the Indo-Pacific, as all strategic indicators point that towards a global confrontation in our region, which is already home to 5 nuclear powers, and in which China and the US are facing a standoff with each other at various hotspots. Now, these hotspots, there are several, but the major ones include, of course, first, Taiwan, that China reclaims as its integral province and says its reunification with China is non-negotiable, while the US sees it as its protectorate. Second, the Korean Peninsula, we all know, divided between North and South, but the hostility between the two sides are not just nuclearized, but they are increasing. And many of the efforts which were being made towards a regional peace are actually shrinking. Third, the Philippines Islands with shoals which are claimed by both the Philippines and China, where every once in 2 or 3 weeks, we see in the papers of a possible confrontation. Fourth, a quieter, which you may not hear so much, but the borders between India versus China, India versus Pakistan, that have low intensity but unresolved issues, but have a potential to re-spark in case there is already a regional war. Now, besides this, there are the US military bases, some 500-600, local and frozen unresolved interstate and intrastate conflicts. Now, in all this, the US tends to fuse itself, its own interests into these bilateral conflicts. And therefore, for that, what they have done, not only the US, but other great powers also, that there are new lattice-like or new frameworks, kind of agreements with sometimes mostly the US at the center, but when 1 or 2 where China and Russia are also involved. For example, the US-Japan Republic of Korea trilateral ties that elevates defense cooperation, the US-Philippines agreement with 4 new military bases and US-Philippines Mutual Defense Treaty that the US can use to intervene, the Australia, US, UK, the AUKUS Security Pact of March 2023, the Quad Platform for Maritime Safety, earlier the Security Pact that the Solomon Islands signed with China in 2023 that led to the US security and economic deals with 3 Pacific islands, Papua New Guinea, Palau, and Micronesia. Then Russia is caught in a war with Ukraine. It has a comprehensive strategic partnership with China and a new strategic alliance with North Korea with an ambiguous clause on each supporting the other in case of attack. So there are all this, you can see the very quick escalation in the region. So the consequences is that a theater of war is being constructed in the Asia Pacific, which is increasing the militarization and nuclearization in this region. There is a rise of defense budgets, not only in the great powers, but also amongst the smaller powers. There are new military bases, logistics agreements, and therefore more interventions, especially in small states. And we've seen that recently. Regime changes in places like Pakistan, Bangladesh, etc. So our report therefore says that this region needs a new security paradigm, which is a common security, which is a viable alternative. The argument that there is no alternative is completely wrong. The common security provides an off-ramp for collaborative de-escalation. You can only have competitive escalation, but for de-escalation, it needs collaboration. So we are calling for a moratorium on further nuclear and conventional and maritime one-upmanship, an immediate return to diplomacy, an engagement with global disarmament, in which the regional actors must also play a role in this de-escalation by saying that no to escalation, yes to common security, or however they want to frame it. And we're offering this common security paradigm because we believe including many of the states in this region, the smaller states especially. Even some of the big powers in the region believe that the real crisis that we face globally and in this region is climate change and irreversible environmental degradation. And this war and militarization are adding to this. Much of the world's poor, many indebted countries live in this part of the region. And this conflict and embittered competitive polarization is adding to the further impoverishment and debt that destabilize these regions, in which then these militarized great powers come in for their own interests. So we don't want these great militarized powers to come in. We want a neutrality, a non which this common security report talks about. Another reason is finally that this region has diverse people, diverse heritage, resources, sea lanes, delicate ecologies, and a very layered history. So it cannot be viewed as pieces in a chess game. You know, one great power saying we should link with South Korea, the other one saying North Korea, and therefore dividing them. So these great games and this hard traditional security needs to be contested. And there is a groundwork for this in all of Asia. The regional organizations like ASEAN, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization also, the non-aligned movement which started in this region, many of the smaller states, whether Indonesia, Malaysia, Vietnam, they're all actually even practicing a form of their own common security by talking about neutrality, about saying the four no's, no to joining any of these militarist alliances, no to supporting any one power against the others. So these are all elements of common security. It's just that they haven't brought it together in one paradigm. So friends, really, our common security report talks about all this. It shows how common security is inclusive, that security of one cannot be possible without the security of the other. Otherwise, that means escalation. We talk about strengthening the peace and security architecture and how it can be done. It is linked with the urgency of disarmament. It intersects with human security. It supports the women, peace, and security agenda, which is talked about by the UN and the international feminist movements. It is based on tolerance, anti-racism, pluralism, and coexistence, and provides for common development and common prosperity, without which common security is the base for these things. So really, we hope that all of you support this paradigm for common security and push our report further into your regions and your organizations. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anu. Again, I really appreciate your sharp analysis and perspectives. And I'd like to turn my attention, I'd like to repeat this one phrase from Anu just now, that Indo-Pacific is now emerging as a theater of war. So these, traditional discussions of tensions, for example, tension in Korean Peninsula, tension in the Taiwan Strait, tension in South Korea, they are not separate. They are not part of this big planning theater of war. And this is one of the structural bases of the urgency that we wanted to include in our report. So from Reiner, good security arrangements needs regional perspective, regional approach, interdependent approach, inclusive approach. And from Anu, we need to think more seriously about regional reshaping and meeting security needs of all the parties in the region, inclusive process. Thank you again. And now I'd like to invite our third speaker, Eng Khan. Let me introduce him first. Eng Khan Zarkar Khan is the chair of the Blue Banner, a Mongolian NGO dedicated to promoting the goals of nuclear non-proliferation. And also he is an international lawyer and diplomat, and he was a key person of establishing Mongolia as internationally recognized nuclear weapon-free state. So, Eng Khan, so let me ask you for your talk, what did you discuss about nuclear threats and the role of small states in our report?
Thank you very much, Francis. I think it's a rich research work, so I'm trying to focus on two issues in which I was quite closely involved with, as you have introduced me. The first one is, of course, the issue of nuclear threats, the growing nuclear threats that we're all talking about. And this is a very important issue. The main issue that was specifically underlined, I think, in 1982 Palmer Commission's report was the danger of nuclear weapons. Though the post-Cold War period has ended, the threat of nuclear weapons has not diminished. In fact, the risk of the use of such weapons has increased with the gradual erosion of the existing taboo against using such weapons and increase talks of possible use of tactical nuclear weapons. Therefore, it is no surprise that the Nobel Committee this year has decided to bestow the prize to Nihon Hidankyo. It was not only in recognition of Hibakusha's persistent efforts to remind of the devastating human impacts of the use of such weapons, but also a reminder of the increasing risk of use of such weapons. This report specifically focuses on nuclear weapons threats in the Indo-Pacific region. Most nuclear-armed states are situated in this region, and there is a risk that the number of nuclear-armed states might increase in Northeast Asia, as well as even in Western Asia, as you might know, depending, of course, on the political development. Geographical proximity of nuclear weapon states increases the risk of the use of such weapons due to time factor, first of all, misperception, miscalculation, and even policy of ambiguity. Hence, bilateral relations are important factors for trust and stability. A bit about the role of non-nuclear weapon states. Many non-nuclear weapon states of the region are already playing a positive role by having established 3 of the world's 5 nuclear weapon-free zones, that is in Southeast Asia, the South Pacific, and Central Asia. Informal studies are being made on how to establish such a zone in Northeast Asia, but that would not be easy, since the interests of nuclear weapon states and of the de facto one nuclear weapon state, North Korea, need to be taken account of. Nevertheless, establishment of such a zone is not ruled out, though that would take time and enormous efforts. When established, that would surely strengthen peace and stability in this sensitive part of the region. However, for that to happen, an inclusive confidence and security building measures need to be taken and promoted, like the Ulaanbaatar dialogue that is promoting development of the so-called soft security issues of common interest, like economic or green development, environmental protection, cross-border infrastructure development, etc. Another positive development is that many states of the region support or have in fact become parties or signatories to the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. That reinforces and complements the NPT and would contribute to promoting a nuclear weapon-free world that we all want to establish. Need for arms control and disarmament talks. Due to the current geopolitical situation in the region, the nuclear arms race, and especially increasing US-China rivalry, a meaningful arms control and disarmament talks mechanism needs to be established. That's a must. Role of civil society organizations. Civil society organizations and think tanks can play a proactive role in initiating the establishment of such a mechanism. International experiences demonstrate that ICANN and other peace promotion NGO coalitions, cooperation with committed governments, have led to practical outcomes. Hence, measures that enjoy broad public support at the grassroots level can contribute to greater confidence and turning common interests into broad committed support. And I underline the word committed support, not support, committed support. These can play a positive political role in domestic politics or even in election campaigns, perhaps, and government policies. This leads me to briefly touch upon the issue of small states. The report underlines that common security means inclusive security. Today, all states, including small states, can and should contribute to common security. They can and should contribute. The growing integrated world is objectively making all states joint custodians of peaceful, just, and stable world based on the comparative advantages of each state, including small states, and they do have a comparative advantages. Due to their inherent challenges, their location, and rich experience, small states are generators of not only soft, but smart power. They are natural protectors of international law, preventive diplomacy, and multilateralism, and are also sources of constructive ideas and proposals, as has been pointed out in the report. They're also expected to play an important role in strengthening the nuclear weapon-free zone regime by eliminating geographical blind spots and gray areas and serving as important building blocks of the nuclear weapon-free world. Therefore, the recommendations should be considered as practical contributions to strengthening the common security. Thank you.
Thank you, Eng Khan, for your very succinct summary of your inputs into our report. I think this report owes very much to the rich experience and experience-based insights of Mongolia and leaders like Eng Khan towards nuclear-free world. And I think also this report has included a very important section on the role of small states. And I really hope that the readers of the report take this message, the role of the small state, as a core and possibility of new international relations, which need not be always dominated by hegemonic powers. There is a possibility, always possibilities for new international relations of non-hegemonic and non-superpower countries. Thank you again, Eng Khan. And now I turn to our last speaker, Joseph Gerson. As you know, Joseph Gerson is the president of the Campaign for Peace, Disarmament, and Common Security, and he has been worked very closely with Hibakusha and Nihon Hidankyo in Japan for more than 40 years. He wrote several books on atomic war, nuclear weapons, and on the empire, etc. Thank you, Joseph, and especially I'd like to thank you, Joseph, for overseeing and chairing the most important process of producing this report this year. So, Joseph, what is your view of the value of this report, and what are the key points of our joint recommendations? Microphone, please. Yeah, Joseph. Still muted. Still.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, good.
I'll get there in a second. Hold on. I'm sorry to be slowing this process down. Okay, so thank you for that very generous introduction, Francis. And just to appreciate, the opportunity to work with such fine thinkers and generous scholars. Before I look at the recommendations here, I just want to stress that we did not write this for it to sit on your desk or your table. The idea here is to have a report that we can use to really change thinking, change the discourse, impact politics. So I urge you to download the report onto your computers, to share it with others, to be using it for writing op-eds, for engaging political actors and figures that you have some access to. So we can turn this from a report with all these words into a political force. So with that, I will kind of move through the closing recommendations. You've heard a number of them already, but at the conclusion of our report, and actually every chapter has a series of recommendations, but we thought to consolidate some of the most important ones in our conclusion. So first and foremost is to commit to common security diplomacy, excluding war under any circumstances. And as we look at what's happening in Gaza now, we should just at their cost, integrate what that is to move beyond the abstractions of war to what it really means. We want to build common security through negotiations, diplomacy, trust, tolerance, and understanding of other cultures. Advance common security as an organic process. The U.S., China, and Taiwan must take action simultaneously to lower tensions and avert a potential war in the Taiwan Strait. They should all demilitarize the Taiwan Strait with a shared understanding that the final solution for Taiwan should not be by military means. For Taipei, following the One China Republic of China Constitution, means managing cross-straits relations wisely. Expanding economic and cultural relations with Taiwan is not to be confused with supporting Taiwanese independence as a way to irk China, which we see U.S. Congress doing. And for Beijing, offering carrots is better than waving sticks in order to win the hearts and minds of the Taiwanese people. In Korea, we should have the Korean War ended, the declaration of the end of the Korean War, and the conclusion, finally, of a peace treaty. Reduce conventional armaments in Northeast Asia, denuclearize the Korean Peninsula, and establish a Northeast Asian nuclear weapons-free zone. In addition, we should be supporting 1.5 track confidence building and inclusive process known as the Ulaanbaatar Dialogue on Northeast Asian Security. We want to establish war prevention and peace building forums involving all the parties to what were the six-party talks. Going up here a little bit. In the South China West Philippine Sea, we need to have denuclearization and demilitarization of the region. We need respect for the security interests of all nations involved in the law of the Sea Treaty and the UN International Court of Arbitration decision. Multilateral and bilateral ASEAN-Chinese negotiations for the South China Sea Code of Conduct, demilitarization of the region, including de-escalation of military confrontations, cessation of military base construction, and withdrawal of missile deployments. We need a regional conference for security and cooperation in the South China West Philippine Sea, in some ways analogous to the Helsinki process in Europe. As Insai Khan was saying, for small states, we need to respect the legitimate security interests of all states. The role of small states in facilitating regional security and cooperation must be recognized and supported. We need to urge promotion of regional stability and non-proliferation of nuclear weapons. This must be an inclusive process. Nuclear and other disarmament priorities here. There must be a universalization of no first use nuclear doctrines. We need the resumption of U.S.-Russian arms control negotiations, strategic stability diplomacy between the U.S., China, Russia, and Japan, establishment of nuclear weapons-free zones, a freeze in military spending, and a halt to AI and other high-tech weapons research, development, and deployment. We must avoid crystallization of the strategic bloc building and related military alliances. We should be urging the development of inclusive regional common security culture and structures. We need to address regional conflicts within the region and independently from the great power rivalries. These nations have their own dynamics, and they should not be exploited by the outside powers. South Asian states must maintain neutrality in any potential conflict between the major powers of the Indo-Pacific and elsewhere. South Asian states must continue to use all channels of diplomacy to resolve the outstanding issues between one another, and they should revitalize regional forums for better engagement regionally. In terms of civil society, we know that governments won't do this alone. The policy of common security requires the enlightened commitment of various social forces, including those represented by participants here today. The active engagement of the peace movement, nationally and internationally, is indispensable. Finally, we urge deeper collaborations between peace movements, freedom of speech and freedom of nonviolent action, and more people-to-people cooperation, which is essential. So just to close by saying it was a rare privilege to work with the other members of the working group, and maybe the most creative part of the whole process was refining these recommendations, which we hope you'll build on.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Joseph. Thank you very much for the excellent summary of the recommendations. Now, I'd like to open the floor for the feedback from all participants and also the speakers and writers at the same time. Questions are also welcome, and any of the writers may be invited to respond to the question part. Or you can write to the chat box. I will try to check as often as possible. Okay, I saw the first hand comes from Jenny Clegg.
Thank you very much, and thanks for everybody for this report, which is extremely important. I'm very interested to hear the speakers, and I look forward to studying the report. I'm from Britain. Britain claims to be a Pacific power, so the recommendations of the report are going to be very important for us in Britain. I'd like to raise 2 points for my own clarification. First of all, on the question of Taiwan. Taiwan it's legally agreed and internationally accepted that Taiwan is a part of China. And in that case, I think it's quite difficult to criticize China's military activities in the same way that it would be difficult to criticize British military exercises between Liverpool and the Isle of Man, or to criticize South Korean military exercises between the coast of South Korea and Jeju Island. So I'm sure that there was a lot of careful deliberation on the wording of that. I'd be interested to hear if there anything more on that. And secondly, on the Court of Arbitration over the South China Sea, I think that this is perhaps also a bit of a difficult issue because it wasn't actually an outcome of a process of common security. And China felt that there was interference in the way that the court was set up. And in that case, an arbitration ruling should be ruled out of order. I would note that numbers of countries supported China's objections on the basis of the law of the sea, the clauses, because the law of the sea itself is very complicated and even contradictory. And China, I think, was supported by a number of Asian countries, including India. And of course, Vietnam wasn't part of that process. Not that Vietnam doesn't have disagreements with China over this, but that Vietnam chose a more common security approach. So I have a question mark over the report's support of the Court of Arbitration ruling. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny. Yes, we were anticipating that some of the sections on Taiwan Strait issues and also other issues have debate points. I would like to have a few more feedbacks and turn to the speakers to give your feedbacks.
Francis, can I say
Yes.
something?
Yes. Who is speaking? I cannot see your hand.
Danning Wang.
Okay, Wang, please go.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Thank you for organizing today's webinar. And I'm located in Hong Kong, and I want to say something about Taiwan Strait and also the mainland Chinese policy regarding the Taiwan Strait issue. I seriously do not think this is the key issue at this moment of the world. If we pay attention to what's going on in Israel, what's going on in Ukraine, and what's going on in Korean Peninsula, we definitely have more important issues to deal with. And of course, today's webinar theme is about Asia-Pacific region. And of course, in the Asia-Pacific region, other than Korean Peninsula, we can talk about Philippines, we can talk about South China Sea, we can talk about Taiwan issue. But still, I don't think this is the focal point of today's chaotic world condition. I agree with the first speaker's point. He made it so clear that we are in a very dangerous condition in today's world. And after 1945, we are on the edge of another major chaotic world system, and we are basically in a vacuum of something is failing, something hasn't been born yet. I also agree with Ambassador Essenhan's point of view. Our current issue should focus on the non-nuclear war issue, because look what's going on in Korea Peninsula. I've been in Seoul for 2 times during the month of September. Yes, we should focus on the non-nuclear war issue to keep the peaceful Korean life. That's my point. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Danning. Wang Danning was one of the resource persons of a seminar we had, a study seminar in preparation of this report. And Rainer, would you like to respond?
First of all, I think we all, as organizers of this webinar, have to excuse that we could not send the report earlier and you could not read it. So I think a discussion about some parts, about all the controversial parts, I think it is definitely worthwhile to read the text and to see what we have written. And when I'm looking to these, and I absolutely agree, when we are speaking about Indo-Pacific region, we should not forget other hotspots in the world, above all Palestine and Ukraine, and the danger, the escalation danger in these wars. But I think in the minimum, IPB is definitely working on these fields. I have 2 points for these for the discussion about Taiwan and China. First of all, I think we all agree that the background for all the development is the acceptance that we have a one China politics, accepted by the United Nations in 1971 and accepted in several documents also between the United States and China. So this is, I think, also for us, the background of our discussion for Taiwan. So saying this, we can never forget that the Taiwan conflict and the problem around Taiwan is influenced by foreign countries, above all by the United States of America, but also by the European Union. So on the one side, this is definitely a national problem, but it is also internationalized by the influence of other countries. And this, I think, is the background we were thinking about the conflict and saying that these conflicts should be solved peaceful. I think this is the main idea of our report. And I think this idea is worthwhile to be discussed when you read the details of the report. And I think a general point is that none of the conflicts in the region are only problems between two countries. They are always internationalized by the influence of foreign countries. And this creates, I think, from my understanding, a lot of the problems in the region. And we have to see that we find specific peaceful solutions for the different kinds of problems. Vietnam, Philippines, and others. And with the report, we were trying to give a direction how these problems could be solved, not less, but also not more.
Thank you, Rainer. I'd like to remind the audience that our report has a separate section on the issue in Taiwan Strait, written by a China specialist, Zhu Ziqun, and his chapter has two sides, Chinese arguments and Taiwan arguments. So in that way, the security needs of both sides, some coincide, some different. So in that sense, the chapter tried to maintain two perspectives, comparative way. So I'd like you to refer to the chapter. And now I call for other questions and feedbacks. And I have a hand from Paul Popinchok. Did I pronounce your name okay?
Yes, sir. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm calling in from Massachusetts, and I think that we Americans have a critical duty to do in stopping the upgrade of the nuclear arsenal of the United States. It is proposed that over the next 20 years, $1.7 trillion be spent to build 12 additional missile-carrying submarines. The United States currently has 12 nuclear-capable submarines, each one carrying 2.5 times the firepower of all the weapons used in World War II. And we want to build, the Pentagon is proposing to build 12 more. It is incumbent on us that we stop this process because it's a waste of resources and it can only serve to heighten the tension between the U.S. and other nuclear capable countries. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. And I'd like to add that two of the richest countries in East Asia, South Korea and Japan, with new leadership in the government, they are more and more geared into the U.S. nuclear arsenal and strategy in the name of Nuclear Weapons Consultation Group. And this is fearsome. This is happening for the first time in East Asia. The multinational nuclear arsenal and mobilization by the most richest countries in this region. Thank you. And in the meantime, Ambassador Shafiq Qureshi wrote in the chat box that Quad countries comprising of US, Australia, India, and Japan must initiate friendly and positive diplomatic relations with China. We can achieve our peace goals only through sincere and true diplomatic relations, and thus emphasize the diplomatic efforts. And I ask the floor if there is more feedbacks. Yes, Ayong, I saw your hand. Please speak. Introduce yourself.
Hello, my name is Ayong. I'm based in Seoul and I'm participating from Seoul. First of all, I'd like to say thank you to the authors of this amazing report. I got a chance to learn about the process from 2 years ago, and I realized how amazing the work that you have done all together, and I really want to say I really appreciate it. Since it was launched today, so I didn't get a time to read thoroughly, but I took some points out of your report, and I was amazed at how you touch upon all the context of the global situation now, not only the Asia Pacific, but all over the world. And I was amazed with the powerful statement of all of the speakers today that you are saying that the common security is possible. And that is really promising and gives me a lot of hope. So I wanted to say thank you. And I have one question. Although we have this idea of common security, the speed of the militarization is really, really high and very fast. And these days, I'm focusing on the topic of militarization of AI, weaponization of AI. And if we think about that sector, we need to move faster to influence on the political decision makers. So I was wondering, what is your plan to disseminate this, good report with the political leaders in the region? How do you plan to do it? Thank
Okay,
you.
thank you, Ayang. So our question is basically, what are the next steps? What is your plan? And now I'd like to add one question from the chat box and then listen to the responses. Melba Marginson wrote that Australia's alliance with the US is a continuing frustration for many Australians. What do the experts here think about AUKUS and joint military exercises in Australia, the Philippines, and some Pacific island nations? Yes, thank you. So we had two feedback and questions. Who would like to respond? Joseph, please.
Yeah. So two aspects here. I mean, the first is that we are a number of organizations, and our challenge and our responsibility is to be getting the report out as widely as we can. We, and I expect many people on this call, have contacts with political leaders, with staff members of Congress of various parliaments, with scholars, and to use all of our methods to do further outreach. Here in the United States, we'll be doing additional webinars. It's rather early in the morning here on the East Coast of the U.S. and even earlier, say, in California. So we have more responsibility to get the word out, and we can take advantage of some of the technology to do that. Also, just to say in relationship to Ayung, there are a number of very helpful reports related to AI and high-tech weaponry. Michael Clare with the Arms Control Association here in the United States has prepared a really fine report on AI weaponry, which you can find on the Arms Control Association webpage. Finally, in relationship to AUKUS, as I think it was Anu who pointed out to the what the Pentagon calls the lattice-like network of alliances and bases that have really been accelerated by the Biden administration. AUKUS is one more dimension of the U.S. efforts to contain China, and increases the nuclear danger not only by the sharing of nuclear technologies, and there'll have to be some uranium involved as well for the nuclear power submarines, but it increases the dangers of with the joint military exercises of an accident, an incident, or a miscalculation that could wipe us all out. So it's clear we have to oppose that, and at a deeper level here, we have to be working for common security diplomacy, not only region-wide, but directly between the United States and China. And we face a really terrible situation here in the United States of facing, we have basically a bipartisan consensus in Washington in terms of the need to totally confront China, to threaten it, to dominate it. And a challenge for us here, but also internationally, is to press the United States toward more, if you will, reasonable, rational, common security diplomacy. As Reiner was saying, we face another existential threat in the form of the climate emergency, and we're not going to be able to protect the world for future generations unless we have a profound level U.S.-Chinese cooperation.
Thank you, Joe. Reiner, you had your hand just before. Are you going to speak?
My only comment is that we are at the beginning of the process of disseminate our brochure. I think we have not really discussed it, but I think the direction Joseph answered the question is absolutely our common idea, to distribute it so widely as possible under the different levels, civil society, NGOs, political level, parliamentary level, till to governmental level, and hopefully have so many positive reactions. And I think we also will develop regional webinars where we discuss specific points of this report. I think it will take the next half a year or next year where we are working with this report and try to distribute it so widely as possible. And a main point for the future discussion is what will be the results of the US elections. So it is also a little bit needed to look to the circumstances we are working. We have this BRICS summit now in Kazan, we have the US elections, we have so many changes that it is not so easy to react to everything.
From South Korea, Peace Momo will translate the whole report into Korean and use it for advocacy and lobby and discussions. And I'd like to invite more feedbacks, probably the final round of feedbacks for today. And from one screen named Jen Lee, I see many people gathering in one room for this webinar. So the questions and feedbacks are welcome from that group participants as well. And Sean, as a contributor to the report, I would like, if you are still there, you to give your responses to the feedbacks of the audience. Okay, Lisa Brumer, is it Brument?
Thank you very much. Thank you for all your insights. Maybe a very broad question, but my impression has been that, especially in Europe and in the US, public opinion is very much in favor of the militarization of the countries because they feel threatened. And I was wondering if you would be able to share insights on how to convince public opinion that common security is possible and that non-violence and diplomacy can achieve more security than more militarization. Thank you.
I think
Yes.
I just want to respond to Liz and say that, part of the common security framework is to show the gap between the threat perceptions that the military, industrial, and deep state portrays and the reality, because they build threat perceptions and therefore escalate security issues, which often do not coincide with the reality. So, and this is related to Annie Clegg's question that, why Indo-Pacific is to build this theater of conflicts. As you can see, what's happening in 2007 Munich Security Conference said we would like Ukraine to be part of NATO, and Putin said, no, please don't. We are with you. Rebuild a European security architecture, but that's how many years it took for the attempt at regime change, of changing the discourse within Ukraine, of making a civil war into Ukraine, of building a trap, a provocation, of Russia falling into the provocation, maybe wrongly. So that is what is happening in Indo-Pacific, and it's our region. So we want to prevent that this may not be a war tomorrow, because right now the focus is on Ukraine and the Middle East. But we want to prevent this threat escalation, this demonization, this intervention where everyone is so scared that they demilitarize and something happens where you have these wars. After all, the war in the Middle East and in Ukraine is not from October 7 or any one particular day. It's taken years to build. And that is why we are appealing that use this common security, match and contest these ideas of threat and escalation. Thank you.
If I may add, the idea of common security, common meaning inclusive and not excluding and not enmity relationship, not confrontational, cooperative, etc. And I think this has a very good connection with the idea of commonness in fundamental human rights. So there is also possibility of linking with the human rights community, that right to peace, right to live in peace, and right to not to be harmed by warfare, claiming this right as a fundamental human rights in the concept of human rights to peace. And everybody has this common dignity to be preserved against the warfare. I think this kind of approach will have more connection with human rights community, and we need more, how to say, rich discussions in this field. And Liz, and I saw you are working with Pax Christi, so I hope that Christian communities also use the rich social teachings on the human rights to peace and nuclear disarmament and no to war social teachings. I think we need lots of connections and, how to say, interlinkages of this already rich resources we have to further our cause of common security. That's my personal response. And let me check the chatting box for the last round of responses. There's a question from L. Lee. Said, I'm wondering why the choice of the term security instead of peace. Can someone explain? So that's a very concrete question. And the next comment is security still carries a connotation of threat. I think this is an excellent point. Who would like to respond?
Joseph starts,
Joseph,
maybe I will add some words.
So I think what we ultimately want, of course, is peace, long term, and with rich foundations. But I think that what we face here is a really quite dangerous situation. And I think, and I can't speak for the whole group, but I'll speak for myself. We have in the original Palme Commission report a vision of a paradigm for how to avoid the nuclear cataclysm as the U.S. and the Soviet Union were moving toward the abyss. And I think we want to underline that even as Anu was saying at the moment, the greatest crises are in the Middle East and in Ukraine and Central Europe. The possibility of an accident, an incident, or miscalculation in any of the theaters that we discussed in today's webinar could escalate to the elimination of the human species. So at least in the next phase, we have to do what we can to create mutually recognized common security. The recognition that it's not going to be possible to develop security for the people of China, for the people of the two Koreas, for the United States, Philippines, unless we respect the interest and the security needs of the other side. So I think this is viewed as a critically important, I would say existentially urgent responsibility in this period. Were we to get to that, then we can build even more deeply. But this is where we have to go to prevent cataclysms.
Thank you, Joseph. Before turning to Rainer, let me read one message from the chat box. Ambassador Shafiq said, yes, I agree. Security creates feeling of fear and threats, and peace brings love, harmony, and comfort and development. Rainer, your response.
First of all, we are not using the word security. We are using the word common security. Because this is a specific point between now, period of confrontation and danger of a great war or great wars in the world, and world peace. And a very important step in this direction is that we are avoiding the confrontation between states, big powers, and this means cooperation, dialogue, and common agreements. This is less than world peace, but it's more than we have now. That is, I think, the key point of this common security report, that it tries to open the way to world peace. And to open the way to world peace means that in the minimum, we need relations between the countries on the basis of cooperation, dialogue, trust building, till to disarmament. So that is the reason I think we were using the World Common Security, because also in the old Common Security report of Olaf Palme, the game was to avoid a nuclear war in Europe and not to have world peace. So it is a step in this direction, but not more. And what we were trying to find a way out of this totally difficult situation of confrontation and the danger of a great powers war now in the direction of more cooperation. And then we will see how we are coming to world peace.
Thank you, Rainer. Of course, we have limited time to have a deeper discussion on the difference between security discourse and peace discourse. And we also have Anuradha Chenoy, who wrote an extensive book on human security approach. But let's round up. I take this as a last question from the chat box. It's also related with the word security. How is common security similar to or differentiated from human security? It's an invitation to Anu, I think.
Yes.
This question is.
Yeah, I think I explained in the chat box itself that, I mean, I didn't fully get the question, but, we've used this. Someone said that why have you used the word common security and not common peace? It's primarily because, increasingly peace is actually getting devalued. The whole issue is about security, food security. It's getting securitized. And national security has become an issue which is not questioned. If anything in a state is even touchy or sensitive, and people say the government or the state says it's a national security issue, people stop talking about it. The conversation stops. And that is why this common security report is actually challenging that paradigm. It's challenging many traditional paradigms and saying that these non-traditional paradigms are relevant today. It's not, common security is not the same as human security. There are differences, and we are focusing a lot on, the commons, the need for common development, the common good. It's like a traffic light. It's a common good for everyone. So that is how common security is. And I hope if you read this questions, because this is a process that we hope to. Thank you.
Thank you. If I may summarize, human security emerged as a new paradigm and also at the same time challenged it to very narrow traditional notion of security. And in that way, human security and other new security concepts and approaches try to change the fixed notion of threat and fixed notion of state interest by presenting alternatives. And I think common security is an expansion of that effort to challenge and bring alternatives to the narrow statist interest and narrow statist interpretation of threat. It tries to widen our perspectives. So it's a paradigm shifting efforts. And I believe these multiple efforts will eventually amount to enrich and concretize our understanding of peace. So that's how I take different security approaches. Now, may I ask all the speakers and the floor if you have really final comments and feedbacks? Okay, I saw one chat coming up. Okay, so thanks to Michelle Clement for the technical arrangement. Thank you, Joseph. And then before close, I'd like to say a few words by calling the names of all the persons who have contributed our report. This report has been helped by many people, and I'd like to thank first the International Trade Union Confederation for supporting this report, and also James R. and Mary Bennett Foundation and the Olof Palme International Center for supporting this report, and also contributing through seminars and through writing, Walden Bellow, Rhino Brown, Sarah Burke, Anuradha Chenoy, Noam Chomsky, Rafi Chaudhry, Sean Corner, Wang Daning, Corazon Fabros, Joseph Gerson, Antonio Guterres, Engzai Khan Zarkas Khan, Philip Jennings, and Ayong Moon, Jeff Nguyen, and Sayo Saruta, and Ju Chin. Thank you, everyone, for bringing this report into our world. And let's hope the best use of it. And probably we'll meet again after a few weeks or a few months, checking the reception of this report from different countries and societies. Now, thank you everyone for joining tonight for this, to me, very special and extraordinary launch event. And as far as I know, this is the first report on common security coming out from Indo-Pacific and Asia-Pacific region. Thank you, and see you again.